Hey guys, how's it going? It's Joshua with Think Liberty. Today we're joined by Alex Merced. Alex is a busy man and has a list of accomplishments. He's the 2013 LP candidate for New York Public Advocate, the 2016 LP candidate for U.S. Senate in New York, currently the 2017 LP candidate for New York City Comptroller. He's also the host of the Alex Merced Cast, Breaking Progressives and Economics Why Not. He's also the founder of the Positivity Caucus and the libertarianwingmedia.com. No duh, just libertarianwingmedia.com. How you doing today, Alex?
I'm doing great. Basically, right now I'm actually here in Connecticut visiting my mom for a July 4th weekend. And yeah, no, I'm just enjoying some time with family.
Nice. It was just your birthday yesterday, right?
It was my birthday yesterday, so basically I took the bus to Connecticut on my birthday, and I'm taking the bus back to New York on July 4th. So
Nice.
basically, I'm using the holiday to travel, the time between to actually relax.
Why not, right? You're so busy. It's nice. I'm sure it's nice being home with mama.
It is. It is. She's a large inspiration for a lot of my views. So basically, it's always nice to spend some time with her.
Nice. Well, happy birthday to you and from me and also from Think Liberty. We appreciate
Thank
you
you very
coming on the
much.
show. So let's start off with I've heard you refer to yourself as a liberty junkie. Am I correct in that? That's kind of like you're
Yes,
saying?
I would say I'm a liberty junkie. I'm an economics junkie. I'm a tech junkie. I'm a music junkie. Basically, before I was a libertarian, I had like long hair and my guitar, and I was gonna be a rock star. And then 2007, 2008 happened, and basically, I haven't been able to stop libertying since.
That's great. I see that a lot. You know, a lot of the libertarians that you meet were prior musicians. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's that whole no authority thing. You know?
Yeah, I think it's like when you have sort of a creative aesthetic, what happens is that libertarianism is all about possibility, and I think that is really in line with sort of creative thinking.
Nice, nice. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the journey that you had to Liberty and Libertarian Party and the movement in general?
Got it. Okay. First, we'll start off with me becoming a libertarian. Uh, Growing up, I always had libertarian leanings. I did, when I was a kid, enjoy watching Stossel on 2020. I read Anthem by Ayn Rand when I was, I think, in like sixth or seventh grade. It was like a signed reading. But it really wasn't until 2000, 2008. Like, so I was actually like a super progressive lefty, had my Michael Moore DVDs guy prior to 2007. So then what happened is that I started a comic book store while I was in college, and it was actually a pretty cool endeavor. I learned a lot about running a business, which also shaped my views. But the store closed because while I started off on a really good foot, one thing I learned is cash management as far as businesses, where you basically don't spend every dollar that you bring in. So we closed the store, and in order to sort of motivate myself to get through because I had to do an extra semester of college because of this, because I took a lighter credit load. So what I did is I bought myself a ticket to the Philippines for a month to kind of be like, okay, just get through the next couple semesters. On the other side, you got this cool trip waiting for you. So I went to the Philippines and I rented an apartment for the month. And the only news channel that was there was Fox News. I'm like, oh, of course, because I'm all progressive at the time, so that just seemed like no wonder the world doesn't like us. So then what happens is that they had that debate, one of the Republican debates from 2007, that included Ron Paul, and that's when Ron Paul confronted Giuliani over blowback. And I'm like, yeah, I really agreed with that guy. And I didn't think about it much at that point. But then when I came back, I started looking more into him. And I'm like, I agree with all this stuff. This all makes sense. And then I just became obsessed. And I literally probably spent the remainder of 2007 just literally consuming stuff from like Mises.org, Cato.org, watching all of Ron Paul's speeches, just literally immersing myself in it. And it was in 2008 I started the YouTube channel after I graduated and moved to New York. And literally, you can go on YouTube and see all my whole intellectual journey from 2008 to today. And it's all documented over 2,000 videos. Actually, I created a separate podcast just to re-syndicate that called Libertarian Comments, where every week we're just kind of slowly going through all those 2008 recordings, then those 2009 recordings, and people can kind of see how I evolved over the years from sort of like from progressive to constitutional conservative to minarchist to like anarcho-capitalist voluntariist into sort of a more just general libertarian label that I kind of carry around now.
Nice, nice. It seems like you and I came in around the same time. 2007 was a hot time for libertarianism, definitely.
That was.
Ron Paul brought a lot of us to the movement. Him and Kokesh too had a lot to do with it for me, definitely. Um, what political philosophy would you say that you align closest with? I've heard you talk about anarcho-capitalism and voluntarism, and that's one of those words that everyone debates. But
Yeah. I mean, I don't ascribe to labels as much as I used to, mainly because the way I look at it is, why do I have to decide on where liberty ends now? And my thing is, how about we just go as far down the rabbit hole as we can, and if the rabbit hole ends somewhere and it ends earlier than I'd like, so be it. But I just want to go far as down that rabbit hole as I can, because if we can push liberty further, why not? But far as like a stateless society, so I try not to use the word anarchy anymore, just because anarchy always conjures up this idea of sort of chaos and no rule, which really what sort of the anarcho-capitalist voluntary is really is getting at is a society without a state. But to me, sort of where I've kind of gotten to is I think of more of a society as sort of an aggregate, kind of like a child. So in the beginning, you're taken care of by your parents, but good parents, are they in the business of taking care of you your whole life? Not at all. The goal is that one day you don't need your parents anymore. So my thing is that if society is allowed and more so to take care of itself, it can get to a point, it can evolve to a point in the same way a child evolves into an adult, to evolve into a state where it may not need or even be in its best interest to have any of those things anymore. So my goal is to free up society enough so it can evolve to that place where what we think of the roles of state may not just be sort of not needed anymore.
nice, yeah, totally understandable. Actually, and I brought this up in one of my past interviews. One of our founders from Think Liberty has this kind of saying where she says, why are we arguing about the last three exits of a 3,000-mile journey, right? So
Mm-hmm.
same thing you're saying, definitely. Who would you say has politically influenced you the most, currently or philosophically?
Probably as far as like my political leaning, I mean, Ron Paul was basically he was the lightning rod that kind of made me who I am. Like literally, the last 8 years of my life would have been completely different if I wasn't in the Philippines on that one day to watch that one debate. I would have been an Obama supporter for the remainder of that election. If I would have moved to Chicago instead, it totally would have been a totally different life. Um, so Ron Paul definitely I have to say is my most formative influence. But after that, I got really into writings. Basically, I got really into the Mises Institute. So I was reading a lot of Tom Woods, a lot of Robert Murphy, a lot of Walter Block, and I literally probably watched every lecture from every Mises university for a good 10-year span during that period of time. I just even if it was like a lecture that they did in the previous one, I would just like listen to it again. So like all that whole crowd of sort of Austrian economists were really really influential in my thinking. But once I kind of felt like I got that pretty well, I started exploring outwards, and I started like reading sort of more periphery, non-Austrian economics libertarians. So I started reading David Friedman, and Milton Friedman. And also then reading stuff that wasn't necessarily libertarian. I started reading the Keynesian literature, the post-Keynesian literature, the neo-Keynesian literature, to really kind of get an idea of what sort of the opposing views are and the debates back and forth. But as far as libertarians go, I would definitely say sort of that Austro-libertarian circle was what really influenced me. And then over the last year or so, far as since I've been involved in the Libertarian Party, in which I got involved in 2013, as far as my effectiveness as a libertarian candidate or promoting the libertarian cause was really shaped by those people who really magnified leadership skills, marketing skills. So as I named before, Larry Sharp, Michael Pickens, Jen Gray, Jeffrey Carson, who taught me a lot, especially over this last year, to really help me bring my A game to the table. So those would be the people, like if you're a Libertarian Party candidate, like those are the four names you really need to be aware of and check out what they have to say. And if you're learning about libertarianism, check out those things I mentioned before. And to make it even easier, I made a nice little sort of list at libertarian101.com where you can just kind of go through the list and get acclimated.
Nice, nice. So you're super positive all the time. You started the Positivity Caucus, right? Does that ever get exhausting for you? I mean, you keep up that positivity online every day in and day out. I mean, is that something that you're able to maintain when you're offline?
It's kind of just my nature. Like anyone who's met my mom, like that's my mom is never negative. Like My mom has gone through some of the toughest challenges that of anyone I know, and on top of that, going through those challenges at the same time as raising me and my younger brother. So watching everything my mom went through at a very young age, and has made it where it's kind of hard for me to look at any problem I've ever had and be like, oh, that sucks. It's more like, well, my mom's had it quite a bit worse and she overcame, so I can do this. And then she's always done it with a smile. She's always done it with a laugh. Like I remember I got into a car accident when I was 16 with my mom. We're both she gets out of the car, totally positive, and just says, "Hey, this is your car now," basically. And so she was always very positive, and that kind of really rubbed off on me. So I'm very, very rarely you'll see me get angry. It's just sort of the way my nature is. But far as the positivity caucus, I mean, there's a reason why I focus so much on positivity. One, I mean, it does come natural to me. But two, I remember when I was in like college, and there was this organization, Crew. They're a Christian organization, and basically, they're like any religious organization. They're trying to say, hey, take a look at our ideas. We'd like you to adopt our ideas and become part of our community. But the way they did it wasn't necessarily it wasn't like going to the subway. Like if I'm in the New York City subways, you'll see people with a Bible screaming at you that you're going to burn, and if you don't listen to them. That never sold me. If anything, I walk around that person. But the people who at Crew when I was in college, I liked those people. They were really nice. You can go to one of their events. They feed you. They'd sing songs with you. Never really even bring up like religion per se. They would just show you a good time and be good people. And it kind of made you want to come back to another event and get to know them better. It made you more curious as to what their other ideas are. Because you're like, man, if these people are so cool, maybe it has something to do with what they believe. So let me learn a little bit more about what they believe. And that's kind of what I'm saying that, we need to embrace more. We need to be aspirational libertarians. We need to, throw events where we just literally, show people a good time, be part of a community and have people question, man, I never realized libertarians were so cool, that they're such nice people. Maybe let me look into what they believe. Maybe there's something to it. And take that kind of approach. At the same time as just framing what we believe in a way that's, because logic is great. Okay, there's a lot of people like us who a logical argument is very compelling, and a moral argument is very compelling. But most people are just looking for hope on how they're going to get through the next day or the next month. So being able to bring that sort of hope and optimism to the libertarian message can help connect to people who basically aren't necessarily as compelled by moral or logical arguments.
Nice. Yeah, it's a great way to show everyone that we're not just fedora-wearing neckbeards, right?
Yes. Oh, I forgot to wear my fedora.
Me too, buddy. Me too. So how do you decide what economic topics you're gonna bring up when you make your videos?
It's literally just whatever like strikes my fancy. Oftentimes I listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of news shows. I'm constantly consuming a lot of information. So what happens is that in the midst of consuming all that information, usually there will be some sort of thought that might pop into my head that I'm like, that's something worth talking about. And I get really excited about that like idea. So then I make sure the first moment I have a free moment is to record it, whether it's recording audio, recording a video, just document it. So that's why there's so many different podcasts, so many different YouTube videos, so many of all this stuff, just because literally I always have my phone with me and then I'll just record something the minute something comes to my head. So it's just sort of when I find something that I want to passionately talk about, I record it, put it out there. Sometimes I go on for like half an hour. Sometimes I go on for 3 minutes. But the idea that it's out there, hopefully someone finds some value in it.
Nice. So you've talked a little bit about that pragmatic approach and being nice people to try and bring them towards liberty. Do you believe that on top of that, explaining the economics of our platform is imperative to the current opinion of the LP?
Yes. I mean, you need all three. It's not... You have to have a moral argument, you have to have a logical argument, but you also have to be likable. Because again, it doesn't matter if you're not likable, no one will listen to your moral or logical arguments. But the thing is, you need those because one, the logical arguments, the moral arguments, once people are listening, are persuasive. So you need to be able to persuade. And it's also, and again, it's not just the substance of the argument, but the way you put it out there. And I think that's where a lot of people are at least starting now to focus more on, because a lot of times we're like, well, if the message is so good, it should sell itself. Well, that's how everybody feels about their product. That's how Tide feels about Tide. It's so good, it should sell itself. But things don't sell themselves. You got to go out of your way and find ways to sell things. This is why marketing is such an important thing, in which way I'm glad to see a lot more libertarians caring about marketing. But you need to have a solid product, and that's the logical and moral arguments. That's what libertarianism is. Those very strong system of moral and logical beliefs to help inform how, justice and property rights and stuff like that. So if you don't have a solid product, all the marketing won't help. But if you have a solid product, then marketing is going to work wonders. So it is important to have that. And also, you have to be able to articulate it in a way that, you have to be somewhat technical, because it builds credibility to your argument. So while not everybody necessarily cares about or feels comfortable with every statistic, you need to have a little bit of you need to have a little bit of the utilitarian flair, just to sound pragmatic enough that people will listen to the moral and logical flair. It's you have to create a well-balanced meal when you want to persuade someone.
Right. So, I mean, currently we're seeing this kind of split between the audacious and the pragmatic factions of the LP and just the liberty movement as a whole. Do you find that there's a time to be audacious? Do you find that there's any use to being a little radical sometimes when we do any kind of messaging?
There is a value in being disruptive. Okay, there is a value because sometimes that can jolt people to at least think outside the box. I don't think that's every time, and I don't think necessarily a pragmatic approach works every time either. There are going to be there's people who Ron Paul was so disruptive for it woke up. Okay, I mean, because he was saying fairly. I mean, while they may seem a lot of it may seem sort of more mild to us now, at the time that was really disruptive. He was saying things that just weren't being said, and that woke a lot of people up. But I mean, I think a lot of that kind of audience that would appeal to that, I think the Libertarian Party, not the Libertarian Party, but the Libertarian movement has gotten those people over the years, because we've constantly been sort of disruptive in that manner. Where we need to grow is sort of in the people who maybe need a softer touch, but you need both. But a political party, I don't know if I think sort of more audacious statements or proclamations and actions may be better suited as a sort of third-party caucus group. So again, like the Audacious Caucus, I think that's a more appropriate vehicle for those kind of more bold statements than the party itself as a whole. So I have no qualms with the Audacious Caucus putting forward statements that I may agree or disagree with that are very bold and disruptive. I do take a little bit more issue with something that seems to represent the party as a whole, because a party is supposed to represent a more diverse set of group of people that run the gambit of sort of tone. So I think it'd be more appropriate in those third-party caucus groups than necessarily in the central Libertarian Party itself.
So when we're talking about these third-party caucus factions, how do you feel when maybe one of these factions may start spouting off about things that aren't necessarily in line with
libertarian values?
Platform, right? Yeah.
That's why, here's the thing: there's always going to be people who will try to hurt your brand, who try to dilute your brand. And the thing is that when it comes to a product, you just have to be the best person at developing your brand. So basically, if other people want to hurt your brand and dilute your brand, you just need the brand better. Because I'm not one to advocate for, hey, let's use intellectual property laws to protect the brand, like Nintendo suing anybody who puts Pokemon on anything. No, in that case, it's going to push us to innovate in the way we communicate, in the way we market, because we want pure libertarian values, correct libertarian values, to be what shares the mind share when people think of libertarian ideas. So you want the right values with the right message. So to me, you want libertarian values wrapped up in that positive wrapper to be what gets out there. That means the people who believe that, we need to become better marketers, better branders than the people who are doing it the wrong way.
Nice. So oftentimes people don't understand how government intervention in the market can alter or hinder industry. An example would be like higher education and grants or student loans. What are some of the interventions that you like to point out when you're discussing politics, and what kind of effect they have on the market?
Now, when I was running for U.S. Senate, what I focused on was the cost of living, because everyone feels the cost of living. Everyone has seen everything getting more expensive, and the three areas that I focused on the most was healthcare, housing, and education. And basically talking a lot mainly about lending programs, how lending programs have pushed up the cost of tuition, how lending programs have pushed up the cost of housing, to the point where basically, if you're someone who's like my age or the generation afterwards, you're graduating college with a six-figure debt just to have to go into another six-figure debt to buy a house. And people are wondering, well, this is what all my parents did. They all went to school and then bought a house. How did they pull this off? Because prices, the price differentials between when their parents were in this situation versus them now is such a different world, because those lending programs have just totally distorted the pricing market. But they don't understand that. They just think that, hey, there's a bunch of greedy people who are charging me too much money. So trying to illustrate that chain of events. And then with healthcare, well, healthcare is just way beyond complicated as far as why prices are so screwed up. Again, a lot of it due to government intervention, which is why I always point people to that book, The Primal Prescription. I think it's one of the best books that really outlines how the U.S. healthcare system has become as botched as it is, and how a more centralized healthcare system is totally the wrong direction, which is what a lot of people are advocating. But those are the areas that generally focus on the things that really hit people's cost of living, because people can feel cost, and then they definitely would like to keep a little bit more of their paycheck. It's not just taxes that affect how much of their paycheck they get to keep, but it's how taxes and regulations affect the cost of everything they buy, and that's something they can really feel and sense.
Nice. So outside of economics, which is obviously your wheelhouse, what are some of the most egregious state overreaches that you speak out against, and why?
The drug war. I am not at all bashful about saying I want an outright end to prohibition of drugs and full out just sort of end to the drug war. And for me, it's very personal on a lot of levels. I mean, I had a brother who died of drug abuse. I have a father who survived drug abuse. So things like drug abuse, things like a foreign intervention played a lot of role in my life. And I'll come back to the foreign intervention thing, why that played a role in my life in a moment. But to me, it's about saving lives. And the two issues where you can save the most actual lives now is the drug war and in foreign intervention. So because basically, I always point out, the drug war, a lot of times we talk about like, oh, you can end drugs and that ends the organized crime, but it's not just the organized crime you're ending, but you're also ending sort of the extra penalties that happen from underground drug use, in the sense that people get pushed to harder drugs, because when you're dealing with a black market drug dealer, you're dealing with someone who's already okay with breaking the laws, so they're not necessarily people who are going to be practicing ethical sales tactics. While if you had a more market-based, transparent market drug provider, chances are they're not necessarily going to be, because they're in the transparent market, in the market that we all get to participate in, that has access to an actual legal system, there will probably be more ethical sales practices that won't lead to a lot of the sort of unpure drugs that cause people to overdose more regularly, or even being pushed into harder drugs in the first place, etc. And then plus, overall, you're just saving your resources and not having to enforce these rules, and you're not having money being sent to drug dealers, drug cartels, messing with Central America, or terrorist groups messing in the Middle East that are funded a lot through a lot of this illegal gun trade. So you're protecting the country, you're protecting individuals, you're reducing crime. Overall, it's a no-brainer issue. To me, one of the most important issues, along with foreign intervention, specifically regime change. Because, for example, I'm Guatemalan. My mom is from Guatemala. Her grandfather was involved in a particular bout in history. So what happened is, in the 1950s, there was a person in charge of Guatemala by the name of Jacobo Arbenz. He was democratically elected, not the most libertarian guy in the world. He wanted to sort of nationalize property, stuff like that, which kind of violated certain economic interests for the U.S. So the U.S. got involved in trying to back a regime to overthrow Arbenz. My grandfather was one of the people in charge of that regime, or the people who overthrew Jacobo Arbenz. But the thing is that, like most regime change, what happens is that regime that gets put into power because they were supported by a third party, they didn't have the popular support of the people necessarily to do it on their own. They didn't have the resources to do it on their own. So when all those third parties pull out because the job is done, they fall apart, and that's exactly what happened. That regime fell apart. My grandfather was assassinated a few years later. My grandfather was assassinated a few years later. And Central America, specifically Guatemala, ended up being in civil war for like the next 30 years, 30, 40 years. And that's the life my mom grew up in. That's before all the stuff she had to deal with here in the U.S. And raising me and my younger brother. So again, my mom's had a challenging life and done it all with a smile. But so that's why these issues are very personal to me, especially, and then the ones that actually save lives. So if you want, that's why to me, like, regardless of Gary Johnson's faults, if you wanted to save lives over the next 4 to 8 years, Gary Johnson was the only choice that was going to save lives. Because when it came to the drug war and foreign intervention, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were the same candidate.
Right, absolutely. I agree fully with you on that. And it sounds so you come from a family of immigrants, I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom you're first generation born in the United States.
Oh yeah, I'm first generation on my mom's side. My dad's Puerto Rican, so technically, I mean, Puerto Rican's a Commonwealth, so technically that I'm not a first generation on that side, but I'm first generation on my mom's side.
Gotcha. So watching the current travel bans and stuff like that's got to be a little close to the chest for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the politics of it, and I understand like sort of the situation that the world is in now, and why people are scared. I can totally empathize when you see the stuff that's going on in the world. Why people are scared and why people look towards control to help satiate their uncertainty. Because especially in the U.S., people have had a nice certainty of safety for a long time that a lot of the rest of the world does not have, and some of that uncertainty is starting to creep into the consciousness of the country, and they don't like it, and they want that uncertainty to go away. Problem is, control just makes things more uncertain. It's like I always use children as an example to kind of illustrate what happens. Like you tell a kid, "Hey, curfew's 10 o'clock," okay, but you don't explain to them why. You don't sit there and say, "Hey, I'm just worried that you're going to be out." You just tell them curfew's 10 o'clock. They're not likely to listen because they don't understand why. So then what happens? They might sneak out the window, and they're gone. You don't even realize it. So now the problem has become worse and less transparent. It's hard for you to see because you think he went into his room, he climbed out his window, and you don't even know he's out now. So things become more uncertain and more dangerous the more you try to control things.
Right. So let's talk about the new slogan that I kind of see following you around. You got a nice shirt for it and everything. It's profit is generosity. I believe that there may be some that watch this that don't completely understand the meaning behind that. I would love for you to explain that because to me, I understand and I think it's a wonderful expression. So I'd like to hear some more about that.
Yeah, because basically, I mean, everyone's been doing the whole taxation is theft thing. And I've noticed that it always starts a really intense debate every time it comes up. When people like, to me, taxation is theft is just more. It's like it's fun. It's fun to say sometimes. People realize it's a little tongue in cheek while a little serious as well. But to me, I wanted to say something that I think is a little bit something that more people can get behind in its proper context, which is profit is generosity. Because at the end of the time, a lot of time you're hearing people talking about how libertarianism, how free markets, it's, oh, you hate the poor, you just want to give money to the rich and all this stuff. It's like, no, we're the truly generous people. Because the only way to provide anybody with anything in a sustainable way is with profits. Because the idea is for you to have a profit. That means you took scarce resources, whether it's capital, whether it's labor, whether it's your own time. You took those resources and turned them into something more. So if I took $5 worth of stuff and turned it into $10 worth of sales and have a $5 profit, well, now I can buy $10 worth of stuff and make a $20 profit. So I'm growing and creating value for other people by, in the video I recently did, Profit is Generosity, I put in an example of water, where basically water is cool, a plastic bottle is cool. Separately, they're not that useful, but together they're much more useful. Someone had to think of that. Someone had to come up with that, and they reward with profits. As long as they can find ideas to create value for others, there will be profits. And that's like a signal to keep doing what you're doing. And if you have an idea of how to put scarce resources together and you cannot generate a profit, then you are not giving, you are not producing value for society, so it's a signal for you to stop. And then plus the fact that you have a profit, you can keep doing it. Okay, so if a government does something and they spend $10 of money to provide people with $8 of free stuff, that's not going to work forever. But if you spend, again, or a nonprofit spends $10 to give you $10 worth of stuff, that may work, but I have to constantly be convincing people to donate to give other people free stuff. But with a business, I just have to convince you in the value of the product. I have to create a product. I have to think about why it's worth it for you. So not only do I have to create a product that's worth it, but I have to learn how to communicate it with you. And that's so marketing, the competition between businesses, that teaches people to communicate better, because we have to learn how to communicate value. And if we learn to communicate better, we're less likely to have hostilities, fights with each other. Now I'm getting into a more grander sort of why the market's such an amazing thing. But we learn to communicate better. That's going to mean less hostility, less fighting, less wars. But the thing is that if you don't have competition, then there's no reason to learn to communicate better, because, well, you just got to go get the thing from that one provider. So there's no reason to learn how to communicate value. But a bottom line is, profits mean you took less and made more. And there's nothing more generous than taking $5 worth of stuff and creating $10 worth of value. Okay, because you're making more in the world. So to me, enterprise is philanthropy.
Nice. Well, I appreciate the meaning behind that. I think some collectivist ideologies may say that in the absence of the state, in the absence of capital, post scarcity would commence. What would you say to that?
Gosh, there's so much to say. So bottom line is, they operate in a world ignorant of sort of feedback, in the sense that, okay, well, basically, this X, providing X has an X cost. So we could just take that much from these people over here, and there'll be enough to provide for everybody. But they're assuming that the amount of like readily available goods and services is like this fixed pool that will stay fixed regardless of where the resources are at. But if you take this stuff from over here, they're not necessarily going to have the incentive to innovate and create more. Or they may not necessarily have the resources if there's some sort of unpredictable natural disaster to sustain those businesses. There's a market. Individuals are too dynamic for that kind of command and control. And the thing is that there may be enough, let's say, coconuts in the world to provide pina coladas for everybody, but there's a process by which a pina colada gets created. Someone's got to take that coconut, turn it into a pina colada mix. Someone's got to make liquor. There's this whole structure of production. And how that structure of production gets developed is determined by a lot of individual decisions made by a lot of individual people. It's not something you can just sit there and say, okay, well, we're free pina coladas for everybody, and magically there's going to be more juice and more liquor for enough to provide everybody with that. It's a lot more complicated, and they're very presumptuous in thinking they can just rearrange things like that.
Yeah, I agree fully with you. I think Vermin Supreme may argue that with you, though.
Well, though, I am for a pony for everybody. I'll go with that.
A pony for everybody. There's got to be, right? 6 billion ponies, I'm sure.
There's got to be a pony-based economy. That's true libertarianism right there.
Some of us from Liberty came up with we were thinking about other things that could be currency, and we decided that chickens can also be currency, and we call it cluck coin.
Yeah.
So
yes,
we refer to chickens as cluck coin.
Yes.
So where do you see the party as a whole headed in the next 3 years, coming up on the 2020 election, and where do you think that we?
Bottom line is, basically, the party's gone a long way. What a lot of people don't appreciate is how far the party has come in 40 years, from a group of people doing a founding convention. I mean, literally like a handful of people, to now having an organization in all 50 states, ballot access in most of those states, elected councilmen in many of those states, and another elected legislators. That is no small feat in 40 years. I am hard pressed to think of another party that has reached that level. I mean, there's a Green Party, but I don't even think they have as much ballot access as we do. So we've done a lot in a short amount of time. And a lot of people are like, well, why don't we have the presidency yet? Well, that's not how it works. It's a pyramid. So right now we're in that stage where we're still getting ballot access in the remaining states. So that's kind of where New York is at, trying to get ballot access in one of the few states that still don't have ballot access. Then winning more of those city council seats across, because what happens in those small elections, when you win those, you build credibility with potential donors. You build credibility with the media. You build credibility with possibly other candidates who may be better candidates, who are also libertarian leaning, who maybe, they don't throw their hat in the ring yet because they don't necessarily think that they can win. But those small wins say, hey, you know what? It can be done. And now the media is like, it can be done. And then donors are like, it can be done, and they're willing to give more money, more media time, better candidates. So those small city council races is really where a lot of the focus should be right now, which where a lot of it is. And that's something that I know people like Michael Pickens has been banging and telling everybody, and I'm with him 100% on that. But then then you move up to the state legislature races, then to governors and federal offices, and then the presidency. Now, come 2020, I'm thinking that we'll probably be at a point where we can start winning some state legislature seats. I'm hoping, and by then we should have a ballot access here in New York. That will be based on the 2018 governor's race. So in that case, hopefully we can put some. We just actually have our first elected official in New York, someone who switched parties a couple days ago by Michael DiCarlo, which is pretty awesome news. But hopefully we can get some people elected as libertarians once we have ballot access. Because part of winning those, what a lot of people also don't realize when it comes to winning governor's races is not just having that, building up that credibility with media and donors, but the organization of all those down ballot candidates. They help get out the vote. They help promote the party brand and whatnot at the local level. So I know when I ran for U.S. Senate last year, the places where we had a local party, the places where we had local party candidates, are the places where my vote total was better. So as a top of the ticket, you need to put a good face forward so that way the brand is developed well, but you need those local organizations that come from the candidates and local affiliates to really get out the vote.
Nice, nice. And you have your own campaign coming up shortly for Comptroller in New York City?
Yes.
Nice.
Correct. So I'm running for Comptroller of New York City. Now, what I love about the Comptroller position is that it's not a position that sets any policy. So as a libertarian, if someone in New York City disagrees with me on minimum wage, disagrees with me on taxes, it doesn't matter. I can't change those things as Comptroller. The Comptroller position is a position of accountability. So I tell people, who would you rather have holding Democrats and Republicans accountable? Not a Democrat or a Republican. You'd want someone outside of that. So if there's a place where a good position to have as a libertarian as a test balloon, this is the position. Give us a chance here and let us show you that we can be effective by being an accountable, a watchdog, someone who holds government accountable and calling out Republicans and Democrats on a daily basis. But I've also been focusing on the pension crisis. New York City has some serious pension issues, which suddenly blew up over the last week in a lot of news articles because some new numbers may show that it's a lot worse than even I was saying a month ago. So basically, I originally went into the race knowing the numbers from 2015, which is the last time they made a big assessment on this. But New York City pensions at that point were 75% funded, which means for every dollar needed to fund the retirement of all the police officers, the firefighters, the teachers here in New York City, only 75 cents was put away. Now, the problem with that is that gap has to be filled. And how do you fill that gap? There's three ways you fill that gap. You either raise taxes, which makes everyone unhappy, especially us libertarians. You can cut benefits of retirees, or the New York City firefighters, teachers, police officers. Or three, you cut the budget, which in other places like Dallas, they've actually had to start thinking about cutting back on the service, the police service, the fire service that they provide now to pay for the retirees of yesteryear, which means less fire departments, less police departments, which means slower response times. And a couple minutes of longer response time could mean someone's life. So you're putting people's lives at stake because of this pension gap. But the thing is that just plugging that hole with more money, whether it be from more taxes, lower benefits, or cutting services, that still doesn't fix the problem. Because the reason why these things become underfunded is because the assumptions by which they calculate how much money needs to be in there are totally ridiculous. In New York City, they assume a 7% return on the pension fund money every year. Right now, you get like 0% in your savings account. You're not getting 7% without taking much risk, which means you're putting people's retirements and taxpayers at risk because we're using a 7% benchmark, which means you're forcing the pension funds to take more risk, and that puts pension funds at risk because in 2015, we only returned a little bit over 1%. And that means when you fall short of that 7%, the taxpayers have to put in what's called a catch-up payment. And we're putting in an extra $1 billion of catch-up payments. So you need someone who's financially literate enough to address this problem. And Scott Stringer, the current comptroller, has never done anything financial. He's just been running for office his whole career. And then literally his previous position was Manhattan Borough President, which is literally an office that does nothing. And then the Republican candidate is Michael Faulkner, former pro football player. His only other claim to fame is that he's a very popular reverend. While that's all noble stuff, that doesn't necessarily give you the financial literacy to attack this position. So I'm attacking the pension issue hard, one, to build awareness for it, because whether I win or lose, as long as people understand this issue better, people can at least start asking for more real solutions from their elected officials. Because this is an issue that's going to blow up budgets. You have Cuomo saying, hey, we're going to have free college, free healthcare in New York. But I mean, if New York City's pension destroys the whole New York City budget, because we've gone from 7 cents of every budget dollar going to pensions to 11 cents of every budget dollar going to pensions, this is going to become a real problem. I recommend everyone to check out the campaign website, Alex Merced for NY.com, where I go into a lot of this in much more detail.
Sweet. So I got to ask you, who do you want to see on the debate stage in the 2020 LP primary race? Who's your perfect lineup up there?
I mean, who I'd like to see as a candidate is Larry Sharpe, because again, as I was talking about earlier, who you want as your top of the candidate, or your top of your ticket, is someone who's going to help build the brand, someone who's going to be approachable, speak well to the ideas, but at the same time leave people with a good impression. So that way, it empowers all your down ballot candidates. I mean, regardless of who the candidate is, I don't think 2020 is going to be the year we win the presidency, but I think we can win state legislature seats, maybe even a congressional seat. But we need a top of the ticket that can put forward the right face to help empower those candidates down ballot to win those races. So I think we can put in some significant wins in 2020 with the right top of the ticket. Someone who's not too abrasive to turn people off, even if they, but also people who know the issues well enough and can speak to the issues well enough, not to come off like they don't understand the issues seriously, and that the Libertarian Party doesn't take issues seriously enough to know the ins and outs.
Right. So I've seen a couple of memes and some posts online that of a Sharpe and Alex Merced ticket. Any chance we might see you running around up there somewhere?
Wow. Okay, that's really cool. Bottom line is this: what I'll do in 2020 will depend on whether people want me to do it. I'm not against the idea. If people show an interest in me running, I'll consider running for the VP slot. But if there are better candidates, those better candidates should be the candidates. But if come 2020, if people want me to, and if it doesn't look like there are better candidates in the field, I guess I'm not against the idea of throwing my hat in the ring. But right now, I'm really focused on New York. One, like my Senate run and this run, a lot of it has been on a focus to build the reach of the Libertarian Party in New York, because we really need to get that 50,000 votes in 2018. Because we get that 50,000 votes in 2018, we have ballot access. Once we have ballot access, we can run enough candidates across the board to really start putting some wins here in New York. So what happens after that, what people want me to do after that, regardless of whether I run in 2020 or I run in 2018 or run for anything, it's going to be, I'll be supporting whoever does run, and so I'll always be super involved in making sure things go as well as possible. That I can promise. But yeah, I mean, if suddenly there's like a groundswell of support for Alex for VP 2020, I'll be hard pressed not to at least throw my hat in the race.
Nice. Well, we look forward to seeing you in the media, and we wish you luck on your campaign. And thank you for joining us here for this little talk. It was a pleasure. Is there anything you'd like to plug right now? Websites, events, any
there's a lot of stuff. Bottom line is you can find all the stuff that I'm involved with over there at alexmerced.com. The main thing that I would really love people to do is, if you find any of the videos that I put out there on any particular issue, particularly compelling, particularly useful as far as illustrating an issue, share it with as many people as you can. And you can find a lot of those videos over there, like places like libertarian101.com, learneconomicsnow.com. And I also made a good playlist with videos from like me, Larry Sharpe, Michael Pickens, with a lot of really useful advice, great messaging, and whatnot over there at intro-to-liberty.com. Also, I'm always interviewing people with interesting takes and interesting things over there on my podcast, the Alex Merced Cast, which is one of 6 podcasts that I host. 3 of them are currently on hiatus for the summer, but just go on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and look up Alex Merced, and you'll find the podcast. Please subscribe to them, share them with your friends. Again, it's all about just getting that message and getting to as many ears as possible, just to talk about these ideas and get a conversation going. I don't expect that everyone's going to listen to me in 3 seconds and be like, "Oh, of course, that's exactly right." If I convince someone that easily, I'd be more concerned about how easily they're persuaded. But if I can get a conversation going, if any of us can get a conversation going with someone, then you can move someone to that right place down the road and get them to a place where they ask themselves the questions and look for those answers and get to a better place. So check out alexmerced.com and like my Facebook page, follow me on Twitter, Instagram. It would be very appreciated.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us, Alex. We really appreciate having you here. You guys make sure you check us out at thinkliberty.co or think-liberty.com. Both of them will take you both to our website. Find us on Facebook at Think Liberty and also Think Liberty TV for the interviews. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you later, Alex.
Thank you very much.